So I'm pleased to continue this discussion today with RTA and Pace. Together, Pace and Metra are providing public transportation services to a region of northeastern Illinois that covers an area 15 times the size of Chicago. Let that sink in for a moment. 15 times the size of Chicago, or the equivalent of the state of Connecticut. That's more than 3,500 square miles of area. Metra serves 242 commuter rail stations on 11 lines. Pace serves 284 municipalities. With us today is Jim Durwinsky, the executive director of Metra, and he's going to be joined today with Rocky Donahue, who is the executive director of Pace. Moderating the discussion will be Amy Rynell, the executive director of Active Trans. Amy is marking two special occasions. This is the 1 year anniversary of Amy's leadership at Active Trans. This is also the 35th anniversary of Active Trans. The party starts tomorrow, and we hope you can join. Later in the program, we'll highlight how you can join, and we're going to be pleased to honor two well-known champions of public transportation, Jackie Grimshaw and Congressman Chuy Garcia. So the floor is yours now, Amy.
Thank you, Robert. I think what we've covered so far across all the different speakers is how the pandemic and economic crisis has dramatically reshaped the pressures on suburban transit ridership and all of our travel over the last year. So we put a lot of critical questions on the table. Who are the riders of the moment and the future? How are they best served? Alfred's story is shared by so many workers across the region, and it is in many ways a call to action to think about how do we get people from where they live to where they work in ways that make more sense. The other thing we know, Jim and Rocky know this better than most of us, is that public transit riders really are the engine that powers our economy. The vast majority of our transit trips are connecting people to jobs, school, retail, and other needs. So we are here today to talk about evolving our suburban public transportation landscape to be responsive in this really challenging moment, as well as really future looking. There's a lot to build on. I really do appreciate Jim and Rocky for grappling with these with us today, and a few more questions that we'll put on the table. Let me do some very quick intros. Jim Derwinski has been the CEO, Executive Director of Metra since 2017, after a lengthy career there in the mechanical department, including serving as Chief Mechanical Officer. I bet there's some really cool stories you could tell us from that job, Jim. He also serves as chairman of the Commuter Rail Coalition, the vice chairman of the American Public Transportation Association's Commuter Rail CEO Committee, and many other leadership roles. Rocky Donahue became executive director of the Pace Suburban bus system in 2019, after also having a long career there. He started, I believe, in 1984. And before becoming the executive director, was the deputy executive director for external relations, as well as internal services for Pace, and pushed for some really important improvements. He is a member of the Illinois State University Board of Trustees, former president of the board, and current member of the Illinois Public Transportation Association Board of Directors, a member of the APTA Legislative Committee, and others. So we do appreciate you being here today and working to improve our systems under these circumstances. You know better than I the reasons people take transit, and also what's most important to riders. Frequent service, consistent service, affordable service. Heard all of this from Alfred. Accessible stops and stations, reliable transfers between stops, and routes fundamentally that go from where people are to where they need to go. So we'll touch on questions across that spectrum. There's a lot to cover, so I'll try to keep us moving at a quick clip. We'll start with where RTA started, which is the money. Thankfully, the federal stimulus package has included critical funds for our region's transit. From your perspectives, how can the recent infusion of that federal operating assistance support your agencies in experimenting with things like lower fares and other innovations that better support current rider needs and get more people back on transit as part of our recovery? How about we start with Jim and then we'll go on to Rocky with this one.
All right, thank you, Amy. Yeah, without that money right now, transportation here in Chicago would be on its knees, and in many other parts of the country, it actually is. So we're very lucky. We've got fiscal responsibility in this region, and we've done a lot of things to really conserve some of the resources so that we never had to completely eliminate any services, even though they're reduced. This new money coming in is going to allow us to really dive deep into new fare products. We're looking at right now, we're using a $10 all day pass. We put that out last June, and it's been very popular. It gives people coming back to the workplace or using Metra a better flexibility than the commitment, the financial commitment of a 10 rider monthly. And we're seeing a lot more people get using the Venture app as well because of obviously the no touch. But we are currently looking right now as we move forward of maybe coming out of this with some pilot fare programs, maybe different on each different lines. We're really starting to grapple with this because one of the things we really want to do is set the bar so that people have the ability to come back to public transportation. There's been a big shift of people moving. And so we know from a suburban standpoint, we probably have a lot of new eyes and ears that could be, starting to come to Metra. And we certainly in Chicago have worked to really try to improve some of the schedules in Chicago. Our Hyde Park service is 20 minutes, and really it sets the example of where true public transportation should be. I'll stop there and make sure Rocky can get a few words in.
Sure. Thanks, Jim. And thanks, Amy. And to start, I want to thank not only you, Amy, but all of Active Transportation Alliance and the Warehouse Workers for Justice for hosting this event. Is our previous speakers and have stated, this is a very important dialogue, and I'm thankful that you're starting this conversation. And I'd like to say that in this limited time, I don't believe we're going to answer everybody's questions and we're going to be able to get everything. But you have to start a conversation at some point, and I'm sure this is just the start, and we'll have many more conversations. As everybody, I'm sure, is aware, we have received 3 rounds of stimulus funding, CARES Act, CRISA Act, and then this latest round, the American Rescue Plan. The first 2 rounds, CARES and CRISA, as Jim said, was life-saving to transit in our region. It's allowed us to continue operations in those first 2 rounds, and now that the money's been distributed, provides us all with a stable budget for not only 2020, but for 2021. The next round, the American Rescue Plan, I think is where we're going to be able to do some of the things that you've mentioned and Jim has mentioned about potential fare, maybe free fares, reduced fares options to bring people back to the system. It's going to be part of the recovery, but my hope is it's also going to allow us to talk about some of the things that Alfred brought up about his challenges of getting to suburban job sites. And historically, Pace gets about 10 cents of every dollar that is invested in our region. And just as Robert had said, we serve an area 15 times the city of Chicago. More people live in the suburbs than in the city of Chicago. More people work in the suburbs than in the city of Chicago. The access to suburban jobs isn't there because we're spending 90 cents of every dollar we invest in public transit to serve the central business district of the city of Chicago. So part of that discussion of recovery has to be, how do we get those workers to those suburban job sites?
Thanks, Rocky and Jim. The RTA did touch on this in their Leanne's presentation about how they have been looking at and pushing, distributing the second round of stimulus funds differently to Metra, Pace, and CTA, and focusing on equitably sustaining critical transit service in the highest need areas relative to who's using transit or who will be using it this year. So we've been touching on this in a lot of different ways, how the geography is really hard. This is a very large geography. Our sprawl is not serving us in how we're approaching transit. At the same time, I think we're looking at new ways to fund transit. And it's calling on all of us to work differently and to prioritize differently. So just interested, you touched on this a little, Rocky, but I'd like to hear more from both of you about your response to RTA's highest need investment approach and the lessons that you will carry forward from it as you think about the work ahead.
I'll start, Jim, and then I'll let you jump on if that's all right. You know, I applaud the RTA for looking at it differently, and I say that very sincerely. In that there's a lot of conversations, and the world has changed since the RTA was, as we know it today, was created in 1984, and the landscape has changed, and the job market has changed, and commute patterns have changed. So I could really appreciate the RTA saying, hey, let's take a look at this. And their critical needs analysis, I think it was a good intent, but I think it discounted the suburbs, and it seemed to rely upon density, and it didn't factor in what we even heard, like Alfred explaining, of having to take a 6-hour commute to get to his job in the suburbs, and it discounted kind of where those needs are for transit service. Now, with that being said, just as Leanne has said in her opening, and you've said, it provides us an opportunity to look at the next round of funding differently, and to take into some of those lessons learned of what I'm going to call where maybe some of the flaws of this analysis. But with that being said, again, everybody was made whole for their budget. That's a good thing. We need a strong and stable CTA. We need a strong and stable Metra, and we need a strong and stable Pace. And hopefully we're there now and can address what I would say some of those deficiencies with the next round of funding.
I agree with Rocky that, at this point in time, it's understandable the way the RTA approached this, but yet at the end of the day, it wasn't comprehensive. That really included a lot of the suburban needs. Looking across the country, we share a lot of information with peers. This is not unique to Chicago. There's just not enough money in public transportation. In general, in most states, public transportation is not funded adequately. We get backed into budgets every year based on, like Rocky pointed out, a 1984 formula, in our case, a 2008 formula. And as the needs change, we're forced as operators of these service boards into positions where we have to make decisions that aren't beneficial to the broad transit needs of the region.
This also, all of what we're talking about is embedded in other systems and processes that relate to this work: economic development, housing development, other things. So it's another thing we're not going to get too far into today, but the next question touches on some of this, which is really about accessing the services. So, and more specifically, getting to stops and station conditions. So people are much more likely to use a system if they can get to it safely. And so we know from our work, from the Cook County transit planning work, and many, many other things, including rider feedback, that safe walking and biking access to the suburban transit stops is a consistent challenge. And a number, a number of PACE stops, the number of PACE stops without sidewalks is stunning. And we know that's not under your purview exactly, but you're a part of the solution. We are working on legislation to eliminate the local match requirement to invest in walking and biking transit on state roads. And so we're interested in what you both think of that relative to how that could affect transit access and how you're approaching this particular challenge more broadly. Maybe just stay with you, Jim, and then we'll go to Rocky.
All right, thank you. Well, I think one thing that's very interesting is that there's a complete dynamic that's been happening. You see it downtown here in the city of Chicago, more people moving to bikes. Last November, we launched our first ever bike carts. And oh my God, what a rave over the weekend after we announced it, even though there's only one car out there. The fact of the matter is the needs of the current commuter are changing, and they have changed. They've changed a lot from when we were set up. Urban sprawl that's occurred really never was designed to meet the needs of 2020, 2021. And so I know in different municipalities, they're putting more bike racks in, they're tying bike trails to transportation. And I think this is a great thing, but it's almost like the dribbles of the financial bucket that get put there. It's not like a core focus. And once again, I think we need to really look at the way things are funded to really make this system something that's robust. And there are great examples across the country of where bikes and walking are much more easy to get to for transit. Here, clearly, we concentrate on giant parking lots.
Mhm. And I'll just editorialize very low parking at those parking lots, which incentivizes people to drive as well. Jim, do you want to talk a little bit about access to, I'm not Jim, Rocky, about access to the bus stops and safety at the bus stops and things you're thinking about and doing there?
No, absolutely, Amy, and you hit the nail right on the head. Accessibility is our biggest challenge to success as it relates to our system, the PACE bus system. And the reality is I can pretty much have a bus anywhere almost tomorrow. And by that, it's, and I don't mean this in a bad way, unlike Metra, who's stuck on their fixed guideway, we have the flexibility. If there's a street, I can put a bus on it. The challenge in the suburbs is just what you've pointed out, the pedestrian access to get to the bus stop. It just doesn't exist in more cases. What we're doing with that is we've aggressively, over the last half a decade, the last 5 years, we created what we call development guidelines. We have asked suburban municipalities to, my term, adopt these guidelines. We don't, you know, it's up to them if they want to use them or not, but we ask them as they continue to plan and develop their communities to have transit in mind. And a big piece of that is you develop, put in the sidewalks, put in the crosswalks, put in the public safety. We will then work to make sure we're putting in the shelters and making the stop safe. But it is definitely a challenge. There's a funding challenge. We've worked as well with the capital bill to get funding for suburban sidewalks, and we're starting to see some of that. We're also supportive of eliminating that local match, but we have to do a better job in the suburbs of pedestrian access. There's no doubt about it.
Appreciate that. Let's talk about a new partnership and innovation that you've been doing around fares. The Cook County Transit Pilot is an exciting and innovative approach to delivering high quality, affordable transit to communities. And it's premised essentially on strong regional coordination from the county, Metra and Pace. So I'd love to hear from your perspectives how you got this done and how we can plant the seeds to replicate this model. So maybe Rocky, will let you kick off on this one and then move on to Metra.
I think the answer is, Amy, what you said. It's that collaboration that occurred between Cook County, Metra, and Pace, and we all realized this was good for the region. This was good for the community. This wasn't, well, it benefited Pace or benefited Metra. It was what was the right thing to do, and we got it done because we all came together and we realized it was the right thing, and it was just that simple. I would say replicating this model, you asked, would require we prioritize accessibility and a willingness to invest in transit. And I can't thank Cook County enough, because a lot of it was, they said, all right, we not only want you to do this, but we realize there's a cost factor, and they came up with funding to help it. Transit plays a very critical role in improving access to employment, opportunity, education, and we need more people to think of transit in that regard.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more that, you know, this was a collaboration. We talked with the county. We independently had our own unique ideas, but the collaboration piece of this is bringing it together. We've always said, yes, more frequent service and lower cost service, more people will probably come. It was always about how do you get that funding there, and the county really stepped up. One of the other things that we're doing right now is Pace and Metra, working with the county and the city of Harvey, is we're completely working on redeveloping what we now are going to call a Harvey Transportation Center. For Metra, it's a underutilized asset right there on the Metro Electric line, tied to basically the busiest bus area for Pace. Our hope is down the road that we can figure out the way to make the free transfer of fare products from one system to the other system a reality. Once we can work that out and figure that out, to answer your question, how do you duplicate this other places? It's all about volume. At the end of the day, these things all cost money. The more people that use it at a lower cost, then you make up for that delta, the differential. So advertising in the communities, talking to people, utilizing the service, and building public policy that drives people to public transportation are the key elements of this. The better this particular pilot works, the better chances it has of not just seating and elsewhere in Chicago, but actually in other urban areas.
You sort of indirectly alluded to a challenge we have in the region, which is the reliance on the fare box as a determinant of our success. And I think we have an opportunity to also step back from that and think much more strategically about how we're valuing transit and service in different ways. So we don't have time, we're running out of time fast. So we're not going to get into that, but stay tuned because I think we'd love to talk to you more about that. Let's take a few minutes to dive in to some of the barriers and opportunities to service frequency and reliability that we haven't touched on yet. We'll start with Metra, with a challenge that's unique to you because of the shared rail lines, which is competition with freight traffic. Freight is obviously an important part of our regional economy, but the interests of the companies often come into conflict with delivering high quality public passenger service. So we're interested in hearing more about from you, Jim, about how you navigate that challenge and what are potential ways to get beyond this, and how can the advocacy community help?
Yeah, I get just understanding how it works, maybe the best thing I can do for this group right here. So Metro Electric has the most robust, frequent, modernized service. It has the biggest flexibility. Why? Because there's not a single freight train on it. We don't even connect to the freight lines there. We own, operate, dispatch the entire thing. That's why it's the best. If you look around the region, the other one that's really robust is Burlington Northern. And that's because we have an awesome partner. Yes, they have a freight business, which is their core mission, but they also respect and actually make sure that the passenger service here, Seattle, Minnesota, and down in LA is a core function of theirs. It's a core belief that passenger transportation is something that they value. On the lines where we see the lowest amount of frequency of service, Southwest Service Heritage Corridor and NCS, that's clearly because we can't get the freight to give us an excessive slots. So the challenge is them on the road. The way you get through this is partnerships. Now there's contracts, and so just operating a train, a crew, fuel, whatever it costs to operate a train, there's also what's called slots. And those slots take up their slots. And so you end up basically, it costs a lot of money. So once again, once you start running a train, if more people can get on those trains, the better economic fortune we can have moving forward, we can then enhance the service more. But the biggest thing that Metra does, and we have specific people designated on a daily basis just to talk to our freight partners about keeping clear, open communications, understanding we both have business needs. It's hard.
Mm-hmm. And Rocky, your experience is a little different. Not as much freight trains, but heavy truck traffic related to what those trains are delivering, among other things. So interested in hearing about the experience of heavy truck traffic around the warehousing facilities in particular, and how that affects timeliness of your buses. And is it similar to what we see in the city when there's heavy car traffic? And are there ways that ideas you have that we can be thinking about addressing this to speed up things?
Absolutely, and you're absolutely right. If we're not reliable, if we're not on time, if we're not competitive with the automobile, there's no reason anybody is going to utilize our service. And the reality is, just as you said, Essentials Trucks, we compete on the same roadways. We only go as fast as traffic goes. Be it trucks, be it cars, be it if there's an accident, if there's weather, if there's a freight train going across a grade crossing that stops our traffic, we have to deal with the road. So Some of the things we're looking at are some are technology related, traffic signal priority, not a preemption. We're not trying to become an ambulance or a police car and change a red light to green, but the technology, the bus gets close to the light, it sends a signal, hey, keep it green a little while longer, let me get through to keep the bus on time. We're working with a number of suburban communities on our arterial rapid transit program. We call it our Pulse program. We just launched Milwaukee Avenue, and we're going to be launching Dempster and Halstead in the very near future. And that's providing, it's not bus rapid transit where it's a dedicated right away, but it's allowing some things to happen. We're looking at queue jumpers. So when a bus comes up to a stoplight, it becomes a small bus only lane where it gets to jump the line. Things we've done with existing infrastructure are very popular I-55 bus on shoulder. We utilize the shoulder to get away from congestion. We negotiated with the tollway and they invested $200 million into a flex lane on I-90. And pre-pandemic, we saw ridership growing 40–50% in that I-90 service, again, because we became a true advantage to the car. So we have to figure out ways to allow transit to have a little bit of an advantage over the automobile.